A.J. Cronin was a doctor and novelist. He was born in Cardross in Scotland. Cronin practiced as a physician for several years but became a full-time writer after the success of his first novel, Hatter's Castle. He went on to publish a number of novels and novellas such as The Stars Look Down, The Citadel, Country Doctor and The Keys of the Kingdom. A few of his novels were also made into films. Most of Cronin's works are a commentary on the harsh social realities of his times and often reflect his medical background. His heroes are usually idealistic and strive hard to bring justice to the common man. His best-known and most influential novel is The Citadel. Written from the perspective of Andrew Manson, a newly qualified doctor, the novel deals with ethics in the medical profession. The book was made into a film in 1938. The story Birth is an extract from The Citadel. It speaks of a life-changing experience that Andrew Manson had while practicing as a doctor in a mining village in Wales. The doctor is preoccupied with personal concerns until the birth of a child changes his perspective on what is important in life. The story makes us ponder about the miracle of birth and also highlights how professionals may need to go beyond textbook knowledge while discharging their duty. Here is a summary of the story Birth by A.J. Cronin. Dr. Andrew Manson walked slowly towards his house. It was almost midnight. He was lost in thought after a stressful evening with Christine, the woman he loved. He found Joe Morgan, a driller, pacing up and down outside his house, waiting for him. Joe Morgan was relieved to see the doctor because his pregnant wife, Susan, was expecting the baby before time. The baby would be the Morgans' first one after 20 years of marriage. Andrew, who was preoccupied with his thoughts until then, hurried with Joe to the Morgans' house. Joe stayed outside the house as Andrew went in. He sounded worried, but expressed his faith in Andrew. Andrew walked into a bedroom where Susan's mother and a midwife waited beside the bed where Susan lay. Andrew realized that it would be some time before the child was born, as did Susan's mother. The old woman, anxious that he might leave, offered to make him a cup of tea. As Andrew drank tea in the kitchen downstairs, he realized that this case would need all his attention. He decided to stay till the baby was born. An hour later, he checked his patient's progress and came back to sit by the kitchen fire with the old woman. His thoughts wandered to the unhappy couples he knew. But he still believed that if he and Christine married, theirs would be a happy marriage. His rational mind and his sensitive heart seemed to be in conflict about this. As he sat there, deep in thought, he was startled when the old lady said that Susan did not want Andrew to use chloroform if it would harm the baby. The old lady said that the mother, and indeed the entire family, was desperately awaiting the baby's arrival. Andrew assured her that neither the baby nor the mother would be harmed. At 3:30, Andrew went upstairs to help with the birth. After an hour of struggle, at dawn, the child was born lifeless. Andrew was horrified. He was torn between his desire to revive the baby and his responsibility towards the suffering mother. He turned to save the mother, who was in a terrible condition. He administered an injection and managed to revive her. He then turned to the baby. The nurse had placed it under the bed. Andrew picked up the child and saw how white it looked. He realized that the baby was unconscious because of lack of oxygen and remembered the treatment used in a similar case. He decided to try it to save the baby. He asked the midwife to quickly fetch hot and cold water. When the water arrived, he started to plunge the baby alternately into the hot and cold baths. 15 minutes later, the infant was still not breathing, and Andrew started to despair. Susan's mother and the midwife stared at him in shock and dismay. Andrew recollected the family's desperate longing for a child. He persevered, rubbing the child with a rough towel and pressing and releasing the baby's chest to get it to breathe. And then, wonder of wonders, the baby began to breathe. It let out its first cry and slowly turned pink. Andrew handed over the baby to the stunned midwife and saw that Susan's mother was praying soundlessly. He then went downstairs exhausted. He assured Joe that both mother and child were all right. As Andrew walked back home, his thoughts were in a whirl. Everything that he had done so far in Blaney was forgotten. He felt that he had finally done something meaningful. The main character in the story is Andrew Manson. Joe Morgan, Mrs. Morgan's mother, and the midwife play minor roles. Click each label to learn more about the characters. Andrew Manson is a doctor and the protagonist of the story. He's a competent doctor. Though he's initially conflicted about whether to give his attention to the mother or the baby, he acts quickly once he decides to revive the mother first. His skills are obvious from the way he remembers and implements a procedure for resuscitating a stillborn child. Andrew is perseverant. He remembers the promises he had made to the family, and perhaps also the faith that Joe had shown in him, and persists till he revives the baby. He does not pay any attention to the midwife, who is certain that the baby is dead. Andrew is a kind and empathetic person. He decides to stay back at the Morgans' house, even though it meant waiting for a long while. He understands the seriousness of the case, and also empathizes with the family's hopes of finally having a baby. He kindly explains to Mrs. Morgan that chloroform will harm neither the baby nor the mother. While he tries to revive the baby, he thinks about how the family would feel on losing a baby born after 20 long years. Andrew is quite conflicted in his mind with regards to his personal life. He rationally feels that marriage is difficult based on his observations, but his love for Christine makes him believe that his marriage will be successful. Joe Morgan is a driller whose wife is expecting their first child after nearly 20 years of marriage. He comes across as nervous. He is shown to be walking restlessly, first outside the doctor's house and then outside his house, 2 tents to enter. This characteristic could be situational, as his wife is expecting a baby after many years, and he's quite worried. Mrs. Morgan's mother is a caring and concerned mother. She conveys her daughter's request to Andrew not to use chloroform to ensure that the baby is unharmed. She also stays in the room throughout the birth of the child and afterwards to be by her daughter's side. Mrs. Morgan's mother is also quite observant. She quickly notes the expression on Andrew's face when he first examines Susan, and offers to make tea as a way of keeping him in the house. Throughout Andrew's struggle to revive the baby, she remains stoic and calm. The midwife is a stout and elderly lady, present to oversee the birth of Morgan's child. She does not appear very competent. When Andrew gives her the child to hold, she assumes it is dead and places it under the bed. The midwife is not of much help. While Andrew is trying to resuscitate the child, she is just a shocked onlooker, terrified of what she sees. Thus, her attitude and actions are in stark contrast to Andrew's. Now let us examine the story closely. The setting of the story is a small house in Blaney, a fictitious mining town in Wales. The events of the story take place between midnight and dawn. The house belongs to a driller, Joe Morgan, whose wife is expecting their first baby after nearly 20 years of marriage. The particular family circumstance helps the reader better understand the motives for the characters' actions, right from Joe Morgan's nervousness to Andrew's determination to save the baby. The story is centered on the miracle of childbirth. The child in the story is born to a couple after nearly 20 years of marriage. This miraculous birth is further enhanced by the manner in which the doctor in the story manages to breathe life into a child who was apparently born dead. The birth of the child transforms the lives of not just its family, but in this case also that of the doctor. The doctor who saves the child's life also feels that he has finally achieved something real, almost as though it is the first significant event in his life. Another theme in the story is that practical medical knowledge can achieve what is considered to be impossible. Andrew goes beyond his textbook knowledge of medicine and remembers a treatment that was implemented in a similar case. This helps him snatch the baby out of the jaws of death. The title of the story, Birth, is highly symbolic. It is not restricted to the birth of the baby alone. Joe and Susan Morgan and Susan's mother are also now a father, mother and grandmother respectively, signifying the birth of their new roles. Most importantly, the title signifies the birth of Andrew, the protagonist, as a truly competent doctor who goes beyond the call of duty to save lives.